So I just wanted to say that today's episode is sponsored by Asea redox signaling molecules. Now, it comes in two forms, the liquid and the gel, plus there's a huge other product range for us. But why did I start taking Asea, and why is it now an integral part of something that my whole family, both four-legged and two-legged, take every single day? Plus also something that all the clients I work with, again, four-legged and two-legged, it's number one on my priority list. Well, part of what I do, what I'm passionate about, is understanding the challenges that are affecting each and every one of us in today's modern living. The more you know, the more sometimes you wish you didn't know, but the pollution in the air, in the water, in the food, the control of our minds, the propaganda. But one of the things that we can do is take back responsibility for our own health. Now, every single cell of our body, whether we're an animal, whether we're one of the dogs in the backgrounds or one of my plants, contain these redox signaling molecules, and cellular health and cellular communication is absolutely key, whether you want to get your body back in balance, whether you want to reverse the aging process, whether you want to address any particular challenges that you've got physically, emotionally. It all starts with healthy cells. If your liver cells are healthy, your liver's healthy. If your brain cells are healthy, your brain's healthy. But just like a mobile phone, most of us have got mobile phones that we use on a routine basis now, but that mobile phone, regardless of whether you've got the latest model, is completely useless without a signal. So what does this technology do? The gel is something that you can apply topically over particular areas of concern, whether you want your skin to look better, whether you've got cellulite, whether you've got an area that's causing you a challenge. The liquid is something you drink each and every day to top up what should be in your cells anyway. But when our bodies are stressed, diseased, challenged, or as we age, we make less of them. So personally, I wouldn't be without it. My sleep's better, my energy levels are better, my mood's better, my mobility's better. If you want to find out more, the details are below. But I'm so grateful that this came into my life, and I'm so grateful I can share it with others. I hope you love it as much as I do. Let me know. Right, we are back for the very exciting second edition, talking about the law of one with Mr. Fox and Brice from Esoteric Atlanta. And Brice and I are co-hosting this episode like we did with the first one. But before we get started, let's start with Mr. Fox. How are you doing, Mr. Fox?
I'm doing great, and I really appreciate you having me on again.
We're so looking forward to it. How are you doing, Brice?
I'm so excited. I'm so appreciative that Mr. Fox decided, after many years of me begging him to come on the channel, started coming on and talking about this stuff, because we were saying before we started filming, the stuff that Mr. Fox has shared with me over his years and years and years of research has actually brought me a lot of peace during this time of huge transformation for our world as we start to move up, as they say, harvest. I've noticed from some of our comments, a lot of people are very nervous because of the craziness, and that I think hopefully Mr. Fox coming on and talking about this will bring some peace to people and give them a starting point to do their own research as well into this this theory, this philosophy. So yeah, I'm excited.
Fantastic. Now, for those of you that are watching this one for the first time, both Brice and I on our channels will have the link below to the first episode that we did to Mr. Fox. You don't have to listen to them in orders, but I really strongly suggest you listen to both, because we're not going to repeat what we covered last time, because this is such a fascinating and interesting subject that's got so much relevance to what we're all going through at this moment in time, as you were saying, Brice, that we want to get through in this series as much as possible. So when we're using terminologies, if it says anything you don't understand, please either put notes in the comments, but before you do that, go back and listen to the first one, because we might have covered it there. So today we are going to start with the really, really important subject of trying to understand in more details the different densities, Mr. Fox. So let's start there, and let's hand it over to you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm going to try to run through the evolutionary process of a planet and how that impacts our experience here and what we're experiencing now in the world. And so I wanted to start out by quoting one of the answers to a question posed to Ra, and that'll help help us move down the path of through all the different what they call densities a planet goes through during its evolutionary cycle. So Ra was asked about their history, going back as far as they can remember. And Ra said, the path of our learning is graven in the present moment. There is no history as we understand your concept. Picture, if you will, a circle of being. We know the Alpha and Omega has infinite intelligence. The circle never ceases. It is present. The densities we have traversed at various points in the circle correspond to different characteristics of cycles. Logos is this a spirit, the innermost spirit of, you could say, a galaxy or a planet. Yeah. So they say a logos has the plan of all densities in potential completion before entering the space-time continuum of first density. Thus, the energy centers exist before they are manifest. And so the planet, the logos, has already its plan of evolution already laid out. And then it just sets upon the path of going through these different densities. So it starts out in the first density. The cycle of awareness is what they call that. And it lasts approximately 2 billion years. And during that time of first density, all the beings on the planet, so we're talking about beings as being minerals or the earth and water. And so these beings are in chaos. It's like energy undirected and random. And slowly, over billions of years, a focus of self-awareness starts to form. So as light comes from the darkness, constructing a certain type of experience, these beings in the first density will eventually gain some form of consciousness. So the mineral and water life upon the planet starts learning through its interaction with fire and wind. And so through these billions of years, this awareness eventually evolves through the water vapor, becoming a sea or a lake or a river, and the minerals sort of forming together, and the earth being shaped by all these elements interacting. So it starts to gain a landscape. And during that process, there was, like I said, this consciousness is born, as well as all these things start to organize themselves. It creates the right environment for viable life to start to be formed. And then that's what moves us into second density. So after this 2 billion years of all this interaction with these beings, these minerals and water, then, organisms can start to grow. It potentiates it. And so organisms grow, plants grow, and out of that, animals are formed, and they have their experience. And that during the second density cycle, that's the longest density, and it lasts for, approximately 4.5 billion years long. And so now the plants and animals, these beings, are interacting with one another, gaining experience, and they call the second density the cycle of growth. And so the plants grow, the animals grow, they interact with one another, and they get to a certain point of evolution, they start to be able to gain self-awareness. And that's when the planet starts to move into third density. And that's the density that we're going through now. And so in third density, they call it, not only the cycle of awareness, but the density of choice. And so Now you're becoming self-aware, and at that point, you can start to exercise your free will. And they say that is what they call a distortion upon our awareness. So when we moved away from the creator, in a sense, we were given this free will. And now in third density, we have to use this free will to choose a polarity. So we can split off, and we can choose to serve the light, or we can choose to serve the dark. And that choice gives us a path forward, or how we're going to find our way back to the creator, either through service to self or service to others. So
before we go further, can we just like clarify for the audience that for us as human beings, what you're saying is third density is the first stop where humans are existing on a planet. So when a planet is just second density, it's only animals and plants. So just so people are aware of that.
Animals, plants, minerals, correct. Yes.
So that's the difference between like an animal on planet Earth right now would be considered a second density, whereas we're third density because we have a more complex understanding of consciousness than like an animal. An animal is still in that second density understanding of consciousness, which is why they're so innocent, really, is because they don't have the complex understanding that we do, correct?
Right, correct.
That would be an interesting discussion, because I know there's a lot of people that would have a different view of that. But yeah, carry on. Yeah,
right. And, we do have some third density animals living with us in third density. Also, a landscape can be a third density being. A mountain can be a third density being. I was just having a conversation with someone the other day about Mount Kailash. And it's considered a very sacred mountain, and a lot of third density being attention has been put on that mountain. They say when a third density being puts a lot of their self-awareness onto something like a mountain, it has the potential of becoming a being. And so. Yeah, so some animals can be third density. Yeah, some landscapes can be third density, and I think we'll realize that more as we sort of our veil is lifted. Anyway, I don't want to get off of topic. So the density of choice, third density, which is the shortest density, which is 75,000 years long, cut into 3 cycles of 25,000 years. So we're here to make a choice, but not just a choice. We have to be putting energy, our awareness towards that choice. So eventually you have to be conscious of that choice you're making to polarize what they call service to self or service to others. And so that's just what this third density cycle is for, is to make that choice, to gain self-awareness, and to eventually, through that self-awareness, with your free will, to choose the path that you would like to, what they call, polarize on. So eventually, you're putting energy towards either service to others or service to self, and you accumulate enough experience and enough drive and direction towards that you eventually can be what they call harvested into the next density. So I can go a lot of places here. If you two want to ask me some questions about the third density cycle and that aspect of like polarizing,
so we can clarify just so people understand, when we talk about the third density experience, it takes many, many lifetimes of a person coming back and living in the third to kind of work towards that potential of going one way or the other way. And you will not go one way or the other way until you've actually made that choice, correct?
No, not correct, actually.
Correct?
So, no, because Ra talks about how you have had to have polarized to pretty good extent on that path, whether it be positive or negative, to even realize that there is a choice to be made.
Got it. So it's almost like you've already reached a certain level of your own just intuit nature of doing what you're doing to realize, oh, I'm making a choice. This is actually okay. Yeah. Cool. Yeah,
you've evolved enough. You've evolved enough within that choice, within that direction, to be able to reach that point where you go, wow, I'm starting to understand what this is all about.
So this is why I've had this
back in your let's say that the service to others path. You could be on a path and you enjoy giving to others, you enjoy helping others. You notice that your profession, or the things, your passions have to do with bringing more fulfillment to people's lives. And it can have in many different ways that could be expressed. It's not just that you're, a healer or a yoga teacher or anything like that. It could be so simple. So simple. That doesn't mean working in a soup kitchen. You could be a musician or an artist. That brings joy into people's lives. And so, there's a multitude of ways that you can serve others, just like there's a multitude of ways that you can serve yourself. Yeah. And so what is said is that both paths, positive and negative, are legitimate paths to merging with the one infinite creator.
Okay, so I've got a few questions about this. So first one, on the level of awareness of the choice you've got. So I can think just off the top of my head of a few people that are so service to others in their daily actions, what I would call really community-minded people, that heart and soul of the community, but haven't necessarily gone down a spiritual development path.
Right.
How much actual conscious awareness do people have, or is that not the point at all? And the reason I'm asking this is we can get almost caught in that spiritual ego where people think because they've done so much work and studying and they understand the principles, but might not be displaying them in their daily actions, as opposed to someone like, I've got the most amazing neighbor who's the most service to others person I can think of, but wouldn't have a conscious awareness of that.
Right. The conscious awareness of that doesn't really matter.
Right.
You can have no spiritual knowledge whatsoever and still be able to move on in your path of evolution down that path of service to others. Knowledge, spiritual knowledge doesn't equal higher frequency or more light or, even really more spiritual understanding. You can go through your third density cycle and graduate, what they call it, graduate into fourth density positive with no knowledge whatsoever. You don't even have to know that you're making that choice. That choice just comes natural through many, many lifetimes, because, just because this planet or a planet in general goes through that 75,000 year third density cycle, you don't have to make it in that 75,000 years. You can go through a whole planet cycle and be reincarnated over and over again for that whole 75,000 year master cycle. And when that planet shifts over to fourth density, whether it be positive or negative, in our case, positive, fourth density positive is what this planet's moving into, you'll just be moved. If you didn't graduate to fourth density, you'll just be moved to another planet and you'll experience the same veil over your consciousness. Yeah. And that's another thing, is that when you go into third density, you enter into that density with a veil over your consciousness. So they say, Ra explains how there have been planets that have gone into their third density cycle, and the inhabitants of that planet, the beings of that planet, didn't have a veil over their consciousness. And so they're in that third density cycle with still, having that fundamental connection with the creator and all of their inherent abilities that would normally be granted. I don't know if that's the proper word, in fourth density cycle. And what I mean by that is that, there would be no real suffering on that planet. You would be able to, if there was any issues with your body, you could immediately heal those issues with the power of your mind. You would be able to naturally, there would be no words spoken. You would just telepathically communicate with people. You would be able to do all the what the yogis would call siddhis, all the siddhis you would have, being able to travel anywhere you want telepathically and things like that. And they said that during that third density cycle, you would think that the people would be able to graduate very easily into fourth density, but actually that wasn't the case, because it's friction that makes us grow, and that friction comes through having that veil over your consciousness. So you're stumbling around in the dark, in a sense, and that creates a more potent learning environment, because when the veil is not there, life is so easy. You have no drive to even help others. You're just living in harmony. There's no issues, and so there's no work to be done. And so
it's the suffering that creates.
What's that?
It's the suffering that creates the opportunity for awareness and for wisdom.
But also it's the suffering of others that creates the opportunity to serve.
Okay, so I just want to understand that in a bit more detail, if I can. So you don't need the veil when you go to fourth density or above, because you're either in the positive or negative, and therefore, say, like we're going fourth density positive, there won't be that suffering, and therefore you don't need that veil. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, right. And that's why after third density, the cycles are a lot longer, because like, for instance, in fourth density, the cycle lasts approximately 30 million years. And so your ability to grow and to refine that growth is found, the greatest potential is found in third density. Of all the densities, you can do more work on your, when I say self, your spirit or your light body. You can do more work in third density because of the inherent friction than you can in all the densities beyond that.
Well, it makes sense in the sense it's almost like resistance training. It's almost like if you do go to like a spinning class, a bike class, you can put more and more resistance on the bike to make it harder to get you stronger. And so when you're coming, the third density is like the density of resistance. So you can come in and get stronger, and that makes sense. You're saying that because we've talked about many people, many souls opting to come back to third density after some runs through other densities to refine things in their soul, to go back through the amnesia because of the value that's there. Or like swim teams, they have what they call drag suits that they will put, like if you wear a Speedo bathing suit, you'll put another Speedo on top of it with cuts in it so it catches water. So you can practice with it on so it catches more water to make it harder. Because that resistance is what's making you stronger. And so if you look at that spiritually, so basically like third density is the last stop of the veil. Once you leave third density, there's no more veil anymore. You're able to see things clearly for how it is. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. And that's, and then there's a more refinement of the work, in a sense. Yeah. And then, once you move into fourth density, then, the process starts where you look back over your third density cycles, and you start to process all of that potent stuff that you went through. Yeah. And let's before we go to fourth density, let's back up a little bit and talk about the uniqueness of our third density cycle, because it sort of ties back into the extreme other side of what we're experiencing, and that's third density cycles that went through the process with no veil. Yeah. Because like I said, it's not just that you're aware that there's a specific type of polarization that you have to gain. It's that you have the environment that helps to potentiate that. Yeah. And so here in our third density cycle, unlike some third density cycles where some third density cycles, it's mostly, or if not all, positive moving societies. So you can say that, like, for instance, Ra talks about during their third density cycle, 99.9% of everyone was moving to service to others. There was no what they call mixed harvest, unlike what we're going through. You understand? So
yeah.
Planet could be mostly positive third density cycle, mostly negative third density cycle, or it can be a mix between the two. And that's the most uncommon, is a mix between the two. And that's what we're experiencing now. And that cycle, because we're very close to graduating into fourth density positive, towards the end of a third density cycle that has the potential for mixed polarity, it creates an enormous amount of chaos, because it's almost like there's a battle taking place. Yeah. And that's what we're experiencing now. As we get close to shifting over the fourth density positive, all the negative, the people trying to graduate to negative have to leave. But until that splits happens, they're going to continue on their path of polarization. They can't, and if it's someone on the service to self path, especially someone who's far along the service to self path, and is aware that they're on that path, they have a deep understanding that they'll never surrender, because because their ultimate goal, the ultimate goal of fourth density service to self, is conquest over other selves. It's the polar opposite of the positive path. We're looking to serve others as best we can.
They're looking to enslave. That's the concept.
They're looking to enslave. Yes. Yes.
So I want to just clarify that with people, because there's a lot of misunderstandings where people say, oh, the controllers have surrendered. It's just a movie. And no, that's not true, because for them to surrender would depolarize them. So that's not at all true. Can we talk a little bit about that so people really understand this?
Right. Yes. They have to be on the negative, to be on the service to self path is actually a more difficult path to be on, is what Ra says, because you have to gain 95% polarity towards service to self to be able to graduate service to self.
So that's why they do the wicked things they do.
Exactly. Yes. They can never give up. They'll fight to the very end. And that's not just because of wanting to polarize. That's also in someone on the path of service to self. They lack an ability to foresee their ultimate destruction. And that's because they lack the intuition, the creativity of the higher centers to be able to have that foresight. And that's another reason why they would never let themselves even entertain them being defeated.
Yeah.
They'll fight to the very end. And it's almost like martyrdom, but in the negative sense. Ra and the Cassiopeans have talked about how martyrdom is not a positive attribute. Yeah. And so they're in a way they're willing to be destroyed on their path of service to self.
Yeah.
So to think that the quote unquote controllers of this planet are the ones that would like to control because they're really not in control, but the ones that would like to control this planet.
So if they're in that situation, would they not, when they eventually leave their current human body, won't they just go to either another third density planet or a fourth density negative planet?
Right. They would either, if they haven't graduated into fourth density, then they would go to another planet.
Yeah.
Or if they graduated, they would go to another third density planet. And if they did graduate, they would go to fourth density negative planet.
So you can see why, in a way, they're quite happy to, even if this is not at a conscious level, you can see why they're not going to give up, because either way, they're going to go somewhere. They're not going to be taken off. But I've got a couple of questions about this, and answer them in whichever order you want to, Mr. Fox. So the first one is, if this is the case, then how does that fit into so many different traditions, spiritual practices, where they are really seeking to understand, say, for example, the Hermetic principles or something, is my first question. And then the other question relates to animals. If animals are, most of them, second density.
Yeah. Okay. So I didn't quite understand the first question.
Well, the first question, we were talking about a bit earlier about how you don't necessarily have to have that conscious spiritual knowledge to be going in the positive service to others' self. So why do so many people spend so much time and effort on the pursuit of spiritual awareness and enlightenment?
Because, I mean, that, gaining spiritual knowledge through different religions and different practices, it definitely helps you along the path of realizing, your inherent oneness with the Creator, and also teaching you, different ways of thinking and acting out in the world that brings more peace and harmony, in both your life and other lives, and so there's nothing wrong with these spiritual, disciplines or beliefs, and so, they are important, and you can graduate, to fourth density before the planet does, as a whole. And so, when some spiritual teachings, like in Hinduism, talk about, the ending of your reincarnations.
Yeah.
I think that what they're talking about is your ending of reincarnations within the third density cycle. And not that, and I think that that's where, as I've become, as I've gained greater understanding through raw material and the Cassiopeans, I've started to realize, maybe the half-truths that are presented in some of these religious texts, like they talk about in Hinduism, gaining through these practices, these yoga practices, gaining enlightenment, and then you don't experience any more births or deaths, and they make it seem as though you immediately merge with the Creator and it's done. Yeah, you've gained enlightenment, and that's it. But I think that where we're making a mistake is that not understanding the different densities we have to go through our, vast spiritual journey. And so I think when they're saying becoming enlightened and not be, and ceasing to be reincarnated, they're just talking about moving into the fourth density cycle. And so you could say that maybe all of these religions, all these spiritual teachings are just to help us along that path to graduate in the fourth density, positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
all
religions are bringing you positive. Some are taking you negative.
That's true.
I want to
say they talk about heaven, and I think that what they're talking about is fourth density positive.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was thinking too, as you were saying that, Mr. Fox, because we actually talked about this morning before we jumped on with Catherine. You said something about how, like, before the Great Awakening, for my case specifically, I had done so much spiritual work before the Great Awakening happening that it hit me differently. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, okay, same thing with the raw material. because I had done so much spiritual work on my own through yoga in India before I even was introduced to the raw material, I had a deeper understanding immediately when you started talking to me about the law of one. And I don't know if I would have had that same understanding if I had not participated. So I think for every person, all these spiritual practice are just tools that are bringing you to the same understanding. And I think it just depends on the person karmically what's going to help them. Is that kind of what you're saying, Mr. Fox?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, whatever practices resonate with you and at that time, helping you along the path to or helping you make a choice.
Yeah. Those different routes to get there. Yeah. So on that note, if someone has graduated fourth density positive, would they leave this earth plane if they're on a third density planet? Yes. Could you be still physically living in your body and be fourth density at the moment?
I do think, I believe that that's so. And I believe that that's what we would call these ascended masters, these people that have reached, what some would say enlightenment, and you can choose to stick around and to finish living your life out, and you can move. I think that after you pass away, you can choose to either stick around this planet and help others sort of in spirit form in a sense, or you can choose to move on to another fourth density planet and live out your density experience there. That's
so to clarify.
That's how I understand it.
So let's not talking about this timeline we're in, because I know that's very different, and we can talk about how we're going to be writing it with the Earth, which is very different than what most people experience. But let's just say it's like 1930 or something, and one of your grandparents all of a sudden reaches fourth density positive awareness, but they're only like 40 years old. So you're saying they're not going to drop dead right then and just move on to the next planet. They're going to get the opportunity to finish their natural life, and when they pass away, then they'll be able to make the choice to stick around in spirit form to help from the other side of the veil, or just move on to the next incarnation into fourth density positive. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
They don't just drop dead immediately when enlighten hits, or else I don't know if many people would be taking on a spiritual practice,
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think they usually end up being teachers, and they'll teach, for the rest of their lives. That's probably the way that they would choose to serve others. Yeah.
So let's talk about the animals issue then. So if most animals, some are third density at the moment living on this planet, but a lot are second density, which means that haven't got to the level of free will. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So can the second density animals, have they got to then, because there's so much, information, so many people are so interested about what animals are going to be with us on the fourth density positive planet. So how does that work? Do Ra talk about that at all?
Yes. And I'm trying to recall. I think the Cassiopeans talk about it as well. For one, when this planet shifts over to fourth density, they can either choose to stay or leave. Yeah, some of your animals could come with you. Yeah, and also, when we have animals that that are very close to us, we share our third density consciousness with them, and we envelop them with our third density consciousness, and it actually potentiates their ability to graduate into third density beings. And so if that were the case, if your animals were potentiated enough through you enveloping them, they would have to go to a third density planet and go through their third density cycle. But if they're second density, they haven't potentiated enough to become third density, then from what I understand, they can choose to come with us, to stay with us.
Robbie better be choosing to go with me, because otherwise
there will be. So that's a good question that leads into this whole some of the fourth density stuff we could start easing into, is that through this planet is going to be newly fourth density. Yeah. So it's being birthed as fourth density, and the beings that are going to be here that are graduating from this third density cycle into fourth, so the the only beings that are going to be able to live on this planet are first, second, and fourth, because the third density beings leave because we, as new fourth density beings, haven't developed the ability to hide ourselves from third density, and we can't interfere with third density beings because we don't want to interfere with their free will. And so all third density beings that haven't graduated to fourth have to vacate.
So how does that fit with the role of a teacher then? So if, you know, so we're talking about, we've got loads of people who teach a lot of the lessons that they've learned in whatever area it might be. So how does that differentiate with the concept of free will? Where's the line in the sand with that? Because
you're saying a fourth density graduated enlightened master staying here and teaching third density beings? Is that what you're saying?
Well, even on the third density, you've got third density beings teaching other third density beings. So surely any sort of learning. Well, so talk about the mass formation psychosis and the brainwashing and things like that. That surely massively interfering with free will. So that would have anyone who's participating in that would, by the very nature, be on the negative service to self path.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
That's how they're enslaving people.
Yeah, as I said, that's the enslavement, is the hypnosis they're doing on people. But ultimately, people at the end of the day have their choice to eventually be aware enough to break free, or, you know, observe the triggers. It's that we talk about a lot. The covenant, like, really, oh, I'm triggered. I need to observe something. I mean, we see that. We not only see that from the left, we also see that happening in our community too. And so, yeah, and I was with the teachers. I was thinking too, the free will choice of going to a teacher or not as well.
But you know, one of the reasons, well, I was going to say, clarify this, one of the reasons why it's important for those graduating the fourth density cycle that they're respecting the free will of third density. That's part of service to others. Yeah. And so it's not a part of fourth density service to self. So that's another reason why we would have to respect that veil.
So would that also cover things like, you know, stuff, what we eat when we're in fourth density? Talk about the positive ones. We know we do know what the people who are the service to self are eating, and we won't go there in this.
Yeah.
And I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing through awfulness.
Obvious.
Yeah. But if you're not, sorry, Mr. Fox.
You were talking about this the other day, about the fourth density.
You're going to be eating rabbits, Mr. Fox.
No, I don't think we're going to be eating rabbits in fourth density.
Good man, Mr. Fox.
We do have to eat. And it's interesting because eating in fourth density is actually helps us to learn, and they say that eating in fourth density teaches us patience because we're so deeply involved with the service of others that we have to be patient to step away and feed ourselves. Yep. And I'm sure, you know, whatever we consume will do no harm, because in fourth density positive, there can be no disharmony.
Isn't that wild though? I mean, so many people, we make jokes about the numb, wanting to eat, loving to eat, but when we're in fourth density, it's literally going to be eating to live, and that's it. Right. Like, we're going to have to be pulled away to actually sit down and eat something because we're going to be so engrossed in what we're doing for other people and in our own. But you said something interesting too. I want to, because we were out, Mr. Fox, we were taking a walk the other day, and you said, how, like, if the first couple of 1,000 years in our mind cycle of time when we get to fourth density is really us recovering from third density, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. It's recovering, and it's processing everything that's happened to us, and then through all our lifetimes, and then it's all of the fourth density beings on the planet pooling all of their experiences together and us coming to an understanding of our third density experience as a whole. And that creates what's called a social memory complex. So eventually what we all do is first process everything we've experienced personally, and then experience everything everyone else has experienced personally. And so we imagine a massive learning experience from that. So that harmonizes our third density as a whole. And that's where we all come together. And that's why there can be no disharmony, is because we're all become one in what Raw calls a social memory complex. And so then from there, we all make decisions together, and we all move together. And imagine how much can be done.
So that's what they mean when they talk about unity consciousness.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Fox, we have a lot of questions about med beds, and Catherine and I talked about this yesterday. And of course, I put up an Instagram story a couple of days ago saying, like, your body is actually the med bed that you seek. I don't actually really believe in this as you call it, the junk conspiracy cul-de-sac, that we get so distracted by these abstract things that we stop doing our work, we stop focusing on our spiritual path because we think that there's something coming to save us, like a med bed. And you said something very interesting off camera. Can you tell us your perception of the med bed when we jump into fourth density positive in the next like 20 to 30 years, as you were saying? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, okay, so as we move into fourth density positive and our veil is lifted, we have the ability to spontaneously heal ourselves. And so there'd be really no need for any med beds, you know? So in my understanding of where we are in this cycle, you know, we're now, you know, closing down this third density cycle and just about to move into the fourth density positive. And, you know, from what I understand, within the next, you know, 20, 30 years, this is going to happen. And so given that understanding, this infatuation with this med bed stuff is a little comical, because, you know, for me, and what the understanding that I've gathered through both the Cassiopeans and the raw material is that, you know, when this veil is lifted, like I said, we're going to have the ability to heal ourselves. And so there would be no need for any kind of technology to help us achieve that.
But I think where a lot of people are wanting them is to bridge that gap for the next 20 or 30 years. There's a lot of people that are suffering right here, right now, with terminal illnesses, missing limbs, animals, loved ones that are really ill. So I think a lot of people are wanting them as a building of as a bridge to get them to that stage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does, for sure. And I could see how people can get caught in that, and you know, and they could have a lot of hope from these devices or this technology.
But it's just probably not happening, because
I've heard a lot of talk about it, but I haven't seen any proof.
Well, there are miraculous healing things available. And what some of the interviews that I listened to, Mr. Fox, where they were interviewing them about the technology of the healing technologies of the pyramids. And some of Ra's answers, if I recall correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, were that actually we don't need the crystals. We don't need to go back to the pyramids healing, because we have the ability right here, right now, which would tie in with the fact that I understand that people want the med beds as a gap, but actually perhaps by the focus on that, they're not realizing that those healing technologies are available right here, right now with what we've already got. Would that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And you know, also, you know, there as we get closer to the end of this third density cycle, it's, you know, all the suffering that we see through, you know, how our food has been depleted, how our environment has been polluted, so on and so forth. That's part of the ending, like I said, of this mixed harvest third density cycle. And what it's doing is it's really just, it's offering people more opportunities to serve others.
Mm.
Yeah. So things intensify, suffering gets increased, chaos gets increased because it's being offered as opportunity to serve. And
Yeah.
so instead of waiting around for things to happen, like med beds or, what have you, maybe figuring out how people that aren't of ill health can help people that are suffering in whatever way
Yeah.
they can.
And that's interesting. I had a question or comment about, because people, I think what happens is people have this false sense of hope that this is all a movie and it's just actors, which is complete bullshit to me. That's complete. And we talked about this in the last episode with you, Mr. Fox, that part of what the fourth density negative does is they try to infiltrate like a Trojan horse. So we know that the quote unquote truther community has been heavily infiltrated because that's what the negative side does. And so when people are now having to face the realization that what they thought was reality isn't actually reality, and that the bad guys, for lack of a better word, are still out there doing their stuff, you've said that they have said that the bad guys will be able to get 80% done of what they wanted to get done before it's pulled. And she's this person, I'm paraphrasing what they said, like, how do you keep the faith when it's just being pummeled at you all the time? And what you're saying is like, this is the opportunity, though. This is the resistance. This is what your soul needed for it to refine itself. And instead of just like feeling sorry for yourself or like giving in to this group, you use that resistance to help others to be even more loving, even more kind. You take the advantage of this time to really hone in on that southern service to others practice.
Right. Yeah.
And can we kind of touch a little bit before we end our, I know we're going about an hour now, but I wanted to make it clear that what we've talked about, Mr. Fox, is that when most planets flip from like third density or second density to third density or third density to fourth density, most of the time all the inhabitants of the planet have to get off the planet, correct?
That's from third to fourth.
Okay. So, but this is a different situation, right, that we're in now?
Well, it's unique in that since it's been such a tough 75,000 year third density cycle for this planet, there's going to be very few people that are going to be graduating either fourth positive or negative. That's where the wanderers come in, the sixth density wanderers that have decided to come here and to help lighten the planet, and in hopes of a greater amount of people making the choice moving into fourth density positive. Because there's a very few amount of people are going to be graduating negative as well. Yeah, you would think like, oh, this planet's mostly negative, but actually it's mostly positive. And we have a hard time seeing that because a lot of the positive oriented people that may not be able to graduate into fourth density positive, but definitely are on that positive path, have had their consciousness sort of tweaked a little bit and have sent them, in a state of turmoil. And so from the outside, it would look that like this person is on the negative path, when in reality, they could actually be a spiritual soul in distress. Because both the positive, distressed soul and a truly negative soul, in a way, can seem very similar.
And it's also, too, I want to clarify is when we talk about graduating, I think one thing people have to understand is that there is a difference between what you know and what you do. And so I think one of the biggest roadblocks for our community is that a lot of people in this community, I think because they think they know some things about the truths of the world, that they're already guaranteed a ticket into the next timeline, but that's not true. There could be a friend you have that completely buys into the media, but yet they are so service to others in the aspects of their life that they will absolutely be going fourth density positive as well. Whereas there's a lot of people in our community that just because they know things about what's going on, but they're still acting in very selfish, nasty, disgusting ways. So it doesn't even really matter what you know, the facts you know about what's happening. What matters is the essence of your soul. Does that make sense? And the essence of your awareness as a soul. Am I making sense when I say that?
Yeah, for sure.
So we can't judge people. That's one thing, judge not yeast, ye be judged. We can't judge people who've gotten this, or who, don't understand the conspiracies. We can't judge them because we don't know. They could be more polarized, more positive than we are. Does that make sense?
Sure. 100%.
And I know the conversation of wanderers is going to open up a whole new episode. Do we want to say
I think we need to do that. We need to do that in a separate episode. So I think I would hope that from people that have listened today, we can see why it's so important we talk about living your life, being in the present moment, actions speak louder than words. So we're seeing a lot of brilliant things spring up about how you can see they're very clearly moving both the individuals and helping the planet in terms of moving towards the fourth density positive. So some of the examples I would give is some of the amazing regenerative agriculture practices that are springing up and everything. So would you say, Mr. Fox, that just reiterating that when people are overwhelmed with the scale of what they're seeing going on, the easiest solution for themselves and everyone else that they love is for them to pour that energy into an activity that is much more service to others?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. The Cassiopeians even talk about how when you find yourself in a rut, whether it be in a business sense in your profession, or it be in the sense of just being spiritually stuck, is that the best way out of that is to turn your attention towards someone else and help them. And that's what helps you get out of your rut.
And there's so much evidence, even some areas of modern medicine are showing that the best treatment for depression, for example, is to actually get involved in some community activity and helping others, and that's sort of clinically proven. So there's so much of this pulling together that I think gives people real hope that they can really enjoy this sort of 20 to 30 year transition period, regardless of what your current state of health is, your current state of wealth is, etc. Because when you're just focused on the service to others, a lot of the bits of the jigsaw puzzle will fall into place.
Right, totally. Yeah,
serving others can also be serving animals, like people that, like Catherine, who loves going and giving your time at a humane society, or helping, because that's one thing I will say. Whenever somebody loses their pet, when their pet passes away, I don't even like to use the word pet, whatever their animal family member passes away, I always like to remind, say, well, you did your job. You enveloped them with so much love. You gave them a name. You gave them a family. You taught them self-identity, that because of you, they now have the opportunity to graduate into third density and start that. It was because of your love, you enveloping them. And that when you told me that, when we first started talking about love, when you told me that about with the animals you have when you start to really love them and share the life experience of a third density. Because you think about Ravi is a street dog from India. Like if he was still on the streets of India, he would not have the awareness of the third density experience that I have here in Atlanta, because by him being in my home, he is experiencing that, and his little personality is coming out. He knows how to make me laugh. He knows how to show off. He knows how to, and so by you unconditionally loving this being, you are giving it that ability to, that's such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. And it's like we get enveloped as third density, we get enveloped by fourth density loving beings as well. And so it's all about loving and giving of yourself to another being with a soul, as an animal has. And so I know, Mr. Fox, we've joked about Robbie being 2.7 density. We're like, he's 2.7 density. He's just because he's so close to like having full on conversations, and and so how beautiful that experience is. It's such having an animal in your home is such a beautiful experience anyway, because no other being is going to just love you without real judgment. You know, they don't care if you're rich or poor. They don't care if you live in a mansion or not. You know, they're still just, they just want to be with you, you know, and that's something for us to learn in return from them. But just to have that moment, just to really love your, you know, that is part of that service. I mean, we see what awful people do to animals all the time. We see what people on the service to self do to animals. And so even giving of your time to other, you know, so the homeless shelters of animals, you know what I'm saying? It's not just going, it's whatever makes you feel like you are a service to this time for the beings on the planet at this time. And so I'm thinking, though, next episode we should do wanderers in the hierarchy of the negative side. Would that be?
Yeah.
Because that's kind of, now we get the hierarchy of the negative side and the wanderers. Now we're talking about, because wanderers only come from the positive side. So we could talk about like,
I mean, there have definitely been negative wanderers, but they're not as common as service to others wanderers.
Because it's something very selfish or selfless to be like, you know what? I'm gonna go back down to that Hot Mess Express. I'm gonna go.
I just want to make one important point to everyone who's got animals in their lives. If we go back to what Mr. Fox was explaining right at the start of this, go back and re-listen to the difference between the different densities. And one of the important things of moving through those densities is choice and free will. So when you bring an animal into your family and you start to give that animal a choice in their care and listen to their feedback, then you can see why that's so important to them. So I just wanted to make that point to everyone, because so many people don't realize that their animals have got the right and need that choice and need to exert their free will as much as we do. That is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Anything else that you want to finish with, Mr. Fox, before we finish this one?
No, I think that completes it for now. I mean, we can get into a lot of different areas, but yeah, let's stop there.
So excited about getting onto the wanderers next. That's going to be absolutely brilliant. Anything else for you, Brice, before we finish?
I will put in mind, I know we're both going to be sharing this, but I will obviously be putting our first episode with Mr. Fox down in the description box below. I'll also be putting a link to the first book of the raw material, because as always, I think Catherine and I are big promoters. We're just discussing this right now. That's all we're doing. It's up to you if you really want to start to embrace this philosophy, get the books for yourself. Mr. Fox was telling me, what were you telling me the other day, Mr. Fox, that you were on the Cassiopean board and you saw somebody joined and they said something about you?
About watching one of your videos where you were interviewing me, and how that's how they got directed to being a part of their forum discussions.
So yeah, guys, so whoever that was, thank you for mentioning us. And we want you to take your, you know, again, we're on the path of service to others. We want you to have your free will choice. We don't want to be your controller. We don't want you enslaved to what we say. We want you to take this information and do your own research, make up your own opinions, come to your own conclusions, and take your power back. And hopefully, as you guys go down this road of really looking at the law of one, hopefully it will give you the same liberation and peace that it brought for people like myself. So yeah. What else is, and for my channel, Catherine, what's going on with your channel? What's new for you, for people watching this from my channel?
Yeah, exactly the same. All the links will be below. Enjoy, absorb, re-listen a couple of times. I've certainly re-listened to the first one a couple of times, and each time I've got more and more out of it. And just think about, you know, if that clicks something else into place that perhaps it doesn't, all the little bits of the jigsaw puzzle for us to ponder over. Thank you so much, both of you. We will be back in a couple of weeks.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
So much for taking the time to listen, and if you feel inspired, please do share with your friends and family. My goal is to inspire as many people as I can to live their best lives, to stay curious, and to raise their consciousness and that of the collective. So to do this, I need to reach as many people as possible, and this needs your help. If you feel drawn, would you be willing to share your favourite episode with 5 different people? This helps us spread the word and also helps me encourage some exciting new guests to take part in this podcast. If you feel drawn to do that, I will be very, very grateful. All the links and discount codes where applicable for all the products that I support are on my 2 websites, catherineedwards.life and catherineedwardsacademy.com. All of the products are personally tried and tested by me, my family, and my clients. And finally, please do press the follow or subscribe button, depending which platform you're listening on. And above all, stay curious and stay free.